Welcome, and thank you for standing by. Your lines are in listen-only mode until today's question and answer session. If you would like to enter the queue to ask a question, you may do so by pressing star and then 1. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objection, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the call over to Heather Brown. You may begin.
Thank you, operator. Welcome, everybody. We really appreciate you joining us. We know everybody's in the busy pre-holiday season mode, so taking some time out for this is a bit of a sacrifice from your day, but I think you'll find it well worth it. We are going to introduce our speaker in just a second, but I want to let everyone on the line know that I did go ahead and put the slides up so that you all can actually download them if you want, if you go into the file section, so you can download the slides. If you have any trouble with that, you can just email the CFPB FinEx mailbox, which we'll give you the address for at the end, and ask for the slides too, and I can mail them to you. Either way is fine. All right, well, it's my pleasure to introduce Irene Skricki, who is a senior financial education analyst, and many of you may already know her, and she's going to be speaking today on paying bills.
Great, thank you, Heather. So first, before we start, as government employees, we have to do our standard disclaimer, which is that this presentation is being made by a Bureau of Consumer Financial Protection representative on behalf of the Bureau, but it does not constitute legal interpretation, guidance, or advice, and any opinions or views stated are the presenters and may not represent the Bureau's views. We always have to say that, and so now we've gotten that out of the way. Next slide. Thank you. Again, probably most of the people on this call know this, but just to make sure, the Bureau of Consumer Financial Protection is a federal agency that regulates the offering and provision of consumer financial products and services and educates and empowers consumers to make better informed financial decisions. And it's really that second part of that long sentence that is what we're here about today, which is to help consumers in financial decisions. Just a word about CFPB FinEx. Again, probably most of you, I'm hoping, know what it is, and hopefully you get our regular newsletter. But it is a kind of vehicle for us to share our materials with all of you, to learn back from all of you what you're kind of finding and seeing and learning out in the world of financial education, and for us to kind of exchange information. And so there's assorted convenings and webinars like this one that FinEx does. And if anyone does not get the FinEx News and Updates newsletter, you can sign up either on our website, I'll show you the URL in a minute, or you can send an email to the CFPB FinEx inbox, which is CFPB_FinEx, FINEX, at CFPB.gov, and just ask to be added to the list. Again, where you can either sign up directly and or find pretty much all of our resources and tools and things for financial educators is on the Resources for Financial Educators webpage. And the URL for that is consumerfinance.gov /adult-financial-education. Again, that's where you can find announcements of upcoming webinars and links to all of the different resources that we have that you can all use for free, download, order, etc. So today's topic, and this is actually somewhere in the high 30s, 34, 35th or so webinar we've done. So it's exciting to look back over the wide range of topics. And I think this topic that we've covered over the years, and I think this topic is one that will interest everyone. It's paying bills, and specifically some of the challenges and struggles that consumers have in paying bills. So this is part of a series of research studies we've done. We've done a previous one in this series on managing spending and one on managing spending related to retirement funds. So this was part of a study that we did that looked at decision-making challenges faced by consumers and then designing and testing strategies to help people address those challenges. And so in this case, it was looking at the struggles people have around kind of managing cash flow and bills. We worked with a contractor and also with a private sector firm, a bill payment processing company that worked with us to do this research, working with their consumers. So we just want to say we're not, endorsing any of the things that they do, but they worked with us to help prototype and test out this idea around bill paying assistance. Next slide.
And yes, we have started. I don't know, I'm going to go ahead and write a note
Well, she won't be able to hear you.
She can't hear us. Yeah.
Sorry, Heather's going to answer that question via the WebEx. And actually, we should note, and probably those of you who've been in these webinars before will know, you can ask questions via the Q&A function in WebEx during the kind of presentation part, and then once that's finished, we will also open up for voice questions. So feel free to send in questions via Q&A as we go, or also we can wait for the voice part. So just quickly, so you know what we did in this study, we kind of did a quick literature review of consumer challenges relating to cash flow and paying bills to know what, we've already learned about these things. And then working with this private sector bill payment company, there was a survey done in the end with 446 respondents asking about people's challenges with paying bills. Just so you know, this particular company served, a lot of their customers were on the low income side, so nearly half of them had income below $25,000 annually, and about 30% between $25,000 and $50,000. So again, it's a low to moderate income group. And after the survey, this company working with us then tested a online bill due date alignment tool. We'll say more about that later. It was just user testing. It was not an actual prototype that was working in sort of the real world. This is more of a lab setting. So this study is really testing consumer preferences and demand and interest. It is not an impact evaluation. We did not look at the impact of this particular bill due date alignment thing relative to not having access to it. I just want to be clear about that. It's really about consumer interest. And secondly, because this is not a statistically representative sample, it's people who work for this, who were customers of this particular company. This is not meant to give us statistically significant data to be generalized to all consumers. So think of this as a general sense of what some set of consumers is interested in, and since you may serve consumers like that, it will give you some ideas potentially on working with people. So let's start out with some background information that we learned in our study. I think the title of this slide will come as no surprise to anyone. Managing cash flow and bills is challenging. First, generally, many consumers struggle to make ends meet. And again, I don't think this comes as a surprise to most people who are working with consumers. Just as background, in the National Financial Wellbeing Survey that the Bureau conducted a couple of years ago, and we have done webinars on all of that data if people are interested, we found that 43% of consumers reported that covering expenses and bills in a typical month was somewhat or very difficult. And similarly, in the same survey, over a third of consumers reported experienced material hardships in the previous year, such as running out of food, not being able to afford a place to live, et cetera. And so, clearly, people are struggling out there in some cases due to, can you stay on the previous slide? Sure. In some cases because people, don't have adequate income. In some cases, it's a matter of managing the cash flow. And so I do want to address that before we dig in deeper. Some of the strategies I'll talk about later around managing bills can't directly address the underlying causes of people struggling financially, such as scarcity of income and financial resources, unpredictable income. So we want to acknowledge that reality up front, that some issues people are facing, financial education is not going to be able to solve. But other challenges can stem from factors that can be addressed around sort of better management of money and tracking cash flow and whatnot. And so those things, I think, financial education can help consumers to learn new skills and use new tools. So we'll focus more on that today. But I just want to acknowledge, FinEd's not going to solve the issue of scarcity and lack of resources and whatnot. So moving on, I'm going to spend just a minute on this slide, which is continuing a discussion of why managing cash flow and bills is challenging. So again, I'm sure this won't be a surprise to most of you, but the first factor here is lack of financial slack, and that is the fact that juggling bills can be challenging for consumers whose income just barely covers their expenses. Some stating the obvious, but if you don't have a lot of slack in your budget, it makes financial decision-making complicated, and it makes the stakes higher, right? You don't have wiggle room for error if you just barely have enough money to cover your bills. And some facts to consider around that, about 80% of consumers report living paycheck to paycheck. This is all research done by others that it's all cited in the report that this presentation is based on. About 1 in 4 consumers say they don't pay all their bills on time. About 1/5 of adults expect to leave some regular monthly bills at least partially unpaid. So clearly, there's an issue of people struggling and not having enough, cash flow to manage bills as they come in. Gives you a sense of how common this issue is. A second factor, unpredictable income and expenses. The term income volatility has been, you hear a lot about that in our field these days. It makes the challenge of managing bills more acute. So other research has shown that 1 in 3 households experience large changes in income year over year. And you think about people who work multiple jobs, have variable hours, may get overtime sometimes, but not other times. They may lose a job. In these and other situations, people's income can vary month to month. Not everybody gets a steady paycheck that's the same amount every month. And similarly, no surprise to anyone, expenses vary month to month. Utility bills change by the season. There can be unexpected expenses for car or home repairs or medical bills. This time of year, holiday shopping can be a significant expense. And so all of these fluctuations in income expenses, of course, makes keeping on top of bills challenging. Third issue is that prioritizing bills involves complex decisions. So here's an interesting fact that we learned while doing this study. On average, U.S. households pay about 13 bills per month. In fact, when we did a first round of research, the number was around 9 bills a month. By the time the study came out, it had gone up to 13 bills a month on average. And that can include, obviously, mortgage or rent, car payment, electricity, landline phone, mobile phone, cable, internet, insurance, water, sewer, credit cards, student loans, right? Lots and lots of bills that people have. If you think about that, there's also intermittent bills for expenses like, medical care, home repair, vehicle. And so at any one month when there's not enough money to cover the bills or there's a mismatch in timing between bills and income, consumers may have to prioritize which thing they pay. And in order to effectively prioritize, you may need to compare the consequences of being late on one bill versus another. And that can be quite difficult. The consequences can vary, late fees, higher interest payments, credit score reduction, having a service turned off like electricity, foreclosure, at the more extreme end. And so for consumers, having to prioritize amongst bills with different late payment consequences, people may end up, one, having to face those consequences, but two, in some cases, prioritizing things with more immediate consequences like getting your phone cut off over things that may have greater consequences in the long term, such as eviction or foreclosure. So it's, it's very complicated when you have to do that. Then in the further around complication, further information around complication, there are multiple channels to track, right? Think about all the ways consumers can get bills or pay bills. Bills can come by mail, by phone, electronically, via email, or on a website. You can pay bills through a variety of channels, including cash, paper check, money orders, electronic funds transfer. So when you have all those options, some are very convenient, but it just means you have more things to keep track of, right? And that can actually make it harder to keep on top of everything. A couple more that we'll mention here. One way that consumers could be sure that bills are paid on time is to use automatic payment services, but only about 1/3 of bills nationally are paid by means of automatic or recurring payment. Our review of existing research indicates that many consumers say that it can be a hassle to enroll. They may not trust the automatic payment option. They may have a preference for paper bills. Or, and this we've certainly heard anecdotally as well, fear of overdraft keeps people from using automatic payment. They're worried that if the payment comes right out and something else has changed during the month, they may end up, the payment may end up not going through. And so paying the bill yourself, you kind of keep an eye on that, but you run the risk of forgetting, missing, being late. And so there's challenges there. And then the last couple are kind of obvious. One is people tend to not talk about their finances, so they're kind of doing this alone and may not have the help they need to juggle all of these challenges. And then, again, no surprise to anyone, most people don't report they do not have a comprehensive financial plan, and many don't have a budget, and so that, of course, just makes it even harder to keep track. So, actually, can you go back one? Sure. So before we get to the results, I'll just say that I think that everything I've said is probably not surprising to you. but it lays the groundwork for some potential solutions. If this is what people are dealing with, there's any number of ways one could explore solutions. And so after reviewing existing research, as I mentioned earlier, the Bureau worked with a private sector bill payment processing company to survey its customers, to learn more about consumer experiences with paying bills, and to learn about consumer interest in specific solutions. So now I'm going to say just a slide about the things we heard from the survey. So again, this is a small, it's only 446 consumers, lower income, but it does give you, it really reinforces what I just talked about what existing research said. So next slide. So what we heard from that survey, again, this is not representative, but sort of gives you a sense of what some consumers are dealing with. So of the folks surveyed, 21% reported that they always pay their bills on time. That's great. It's only 21% though. 39% reported mostly paying on time, but not always. And 40% of this particular group said that they sometimes pay, rarely, or never pay bills on time. We grouped all those together. But again, showing you that it's quite a significant number of folks in this particular group who were struggling to keep their payments on time. We found that younger respondents and those with income below $75,000, probably not surprisingly, were substantially less likely to report paying all of their bills on time. So definitely an issue. Half of people, whether or not they said they paid on time, they reported having to juggle bills pretty much all of the time. So it's definitely an issue that was affecting, this segment of consumers quite significantly. So then we asked some reasons. We're just going to focus on the reasons that led to our solution. So next slide, please. Thank you. Something that really jumped out to us from this survey was that when people were asked why they fell behind on bills, it was often because of a timing mismatch between the arrival of income and the date of the bills that they had to pay. So some people specifically said that 50% said that the bills were due before I got paid, before my paycheck came, was an important reason for falling behind. And kind of in a similar vein, 40%, and people could choose more than one, so these are not additive, but 40% responded that the way I get paid does not line up with paying my bills. So this suggested potentially the importance for people of really lining up income sources and bills and seeing whether there could be changes made, particularly to bill due dates where that's possible, to see if it could help align the income and outflow in a way that's, makes it easier to pay the bills. So that was the solution that we kind of followed up on, fairly straightforward. But what the groups we were working with did was they tested a prototype of a bill due date change tool. It was really a form that consumers could fill out to list out the different bills that they had, the dates, look at the amounts, and figure out whether requesting to move a due date might actually help them better manage the bills. So on the next slide, this is what we did. We prototyped this form that would allow people to think about their bills through a simple monthly visual planning tool, line up payments and income, payment dates and income inflows, and see where there are likely to be potential shortfalls, and then see whether consumers wanted to reach out to their billers and request a due date. The tool we tested, we then allowed people to, if they wanted to actually request that bill due date, they could take the form and send it in themselves. The tool didn't actually do it for you, at least the version we tested, but and then we asked people what they thought of this. The good news was 80% of people who tried out this prototype said they were very interested in following through on changing the due date for at least one of their bills. They thought it would be very valuable to help managing their monthly finances. Next slide. Slide doesn't want to move. There you go. So of the consumers who participated in this user testing, here's just a few things they said about the tool. Most of them reported they had never tried to change billing dates because they didn't know that they could. They didn't even realize that was an option. So that's an interesting finding in and of itself, that in fact, if people know that it's possible, and again, it varies by biller, but if it's possible, that it's something that might actually be useful to them. When going through this process, most of the people participating were able to identify at least one bill that had a due date that they thought it would be helpful to change, that would help them, again, better manage bills. And the most common selections were utility and phone bills. They typically chose either the 1st or 17th of the month as a date they might want the bill to be due, because those dates line up sort of right after, on, or after a payday if they get paid by monthly. Some people chose other dates, but those were the most common. And then this particular tool gave people the option of either printing out this form and notifying the biller directly, or asked if they would have liked someone else to do it, meaning if you had an app, or if you had a financial educator or somebody who could actually help you request that change. And about half of people said, I'd like to do it myself, and half said, we would love someone to do it for me. And then this last thing I'll note, I think is quite important. For those who had, and there's about a third of people, I think, who had tried to change a bill due date in the past on their own, only a third of those, a third of a third, essentially succeeded. Some of them found that billers said it couldn't be done, customer service didn't know how to, they got frustrated, or communications didn't work out. So that just does raise the issue that it's not possible in every case to change your bill due date, but it can be done for some billers. And so we just want to make sure people realize when we say this is a potential thing you can do, it's not always possible. And some consumers who in fact tried it found that it was not. But of course, a third of those folks did succeed, which says that it can be done in some cases. So, so that was where our study ended. We did not go on to actually do a more rigorous evaluation of whether this tool actually had long-term impact. We would love it if somebody else did that. But if you go to the next slide, we do think there's important lessons in just learning what consumers thought would be useful and trying it out. So the implications for the financial education field, for all of you participating here, is that consumers can think about their monthly inflows and outflows and assess whether changing a bill due date would be appropriate for their situation. We have a tool to show you for that in just a minute. And of course, financial education professionals like yourselves can use these findings to help consumers do that and help them figure out whether this would make sense. And then, of course, we would love it if billers and other private sector entities said, hey, this kind of flexibility can meet consumer demand, because we found that 80% of at least this particular set of folks were very interested, and it could potentially improve timely payment of customer bills. So certainly we hope that folks out there in the world will take these lessons and think about what could be done with them. So all of what you just heard is in the study Consumer Insights on Paying Bills, which is on our website, and if you received our newsletter, you've got the link to it. What we did after completing the study was we said, well, they tested a tool. This was owned by the private sector company developed it, so we wanted to develop a publicly available version of a tool that could help people think about whether it makes sense to change a bill due date. So that is, in fact, what we released when we released the study. If you want to go to the next slide, actually, we're going to show you some tools and resources. The first is this new Request to Change in Your Bill Due Date worksheet. So just so you know, it is a 6-page worksheet, so 3 pages, double-sided. We tried really hard to make it shorter. It was our design people wrestled, but when you see what's in it, you'll see you really can't squeeze it into a shorter amount. What I'm going to show you on the slides, I've broken it up into pieces because you wouldn't be able to see it if I put a whole page, but this is actually a 6-page worksheet that you can print out. Eventually, hopefully, we'll get it up on our order site so you can order it, but right now you can download and print it out yourself. It starts off with an intro just saying, you may be able to avoid late fees and other consequences if you map out your monthly bills and set up a bill pay calendar. And so the sections will be organizing your bill schedule, secondly, determining your monthly inflows and outflows, and then consider requesting a change in due date. So there's a section on each of these that I will show you now. Next slide. So the first thing the worksheet does is to try to get people to think about their situation, is to encourage people to think about challenges they're having with paying bills. So little check boxes. I don't regularly check my monthly income and bills or track my monthly income and bills. I struggle to pay my bills and expenses because my paychecks are at different amounts for different times from month to month. That's getting at income volatility. sometimes my bills come at times when I don't have the money to pay them. And fourth, I don't always manage to pay all of my bills on time. So this is just meant to get people to reflect. Do I do these things? And then we say, if you check one or more of these boxes, try out some of the steps, the tips in step one. So kind of a moment of reflection. And then it's on the second half of the lower half of the page, but here go to the next slide. I'll show it here. So we start off with some instructions on organizing your bill schedule. So there's a chart, which will be on the next slide. I'll show you in a second, in which we recommend that people or suggest that people gather all of their bills and fill them in on the page I'll show you on the next slide. Write down the company, not yet, write down the company you owe it to, the due dates, the dates you would normally pay the bill, et cetera, and then keep this list where you can see it and update it regularly. So on the next page, next slide, and then we suggest you consider signing up for bill reminder services and apps that can help remind you when to pay things, and other resources and calendars that are available. There's a link there to another resource we have through our Your Money, Your Goals. But this all leads up to the next page. And it's truncated because I couldn't fit it all on one page. But essentially, this is a very simple little worksheet where you can write down your bill schedule. And so there's a place for rent, mortgage, electricity, water, gas, cell phone, credit card. And there's more lines that don't show, including some that are, open-ended, so for things that aren't there. And where you can write down the due date, when you usually pay it. Hopefully that's before it's due, but it might not be. Do you ever pay late? You can check that off. Again, it'll help trigger whether that's one of the bills that is giving you particular trouble, how you pay it, and then it's a place for you to write down the late fee if you do pay late. So that, again, will help you compare, which bills have higher late fees and more significant consequences. So you can organize all of your stuff here on this page. Then you go to the next page, and these are the instructions for a chart you'll see on the next slide, but let me just say this first. So once you've done that, you've got all your bills in one place. Now you want to map out where your income falls as well to help you visualize your flow. So you take those bills from the page you just did. There was just no way to put it all on one page. We really did try. My apologies. You have to copy them over. In some other world, we would love to have one where it kind of took care of it all at once. But you want to copy over the bills in the week that they're due, and then also record like when your income usually comes in. And then you'll be able to see, where maybe moving a due date might make a difference, or where you can see what weeks you're having trouble. And as we note in the green box, it's important to not forget income that doesn't come in every month, like a tax refund, and also on the previous worksheet at the bottom, there was a place for bills that don't come every month. So, bills that may be only occasional, or where I live, the water bill comes every 3 months or every third month. It's like, oh, I forgot about that bill. So, there's situations like that you want to capture. So those are the instructions. On the next page, not the prettiest, but here we group things by week. So I think we have sort of four-ish weeks. And you can put the bills due that week. We didn't do it 31 lines because it was too complicated. We did it by week. So you can put the bill, the amount, and then you can put when the income comes. And so if you get a paycheck every other week, you can record it. If you maybe work different hours, you could try to capture that, or different, jobs that maybe aren't every week, or other types of occasional income. And then you can kind of see, hey, look, it turns out that my electric bill is coming just before the second weekend a month when I work extra hours, and maybe I could try to move that. So you can record where you might want to think about a different due date for that bill. So this is a place to kind of put all that in one place. And then on our last page of this worksheet, it's some instructions on consider requesting a change in bill due date. So it tells you how you can explore a company's website or call to find out, is it possible to change a due date? Some companies have certain requirements you have to meet. It's going to vary by the biller. Some companies won't let you, but some will. And so you can identify a due date. You can request that either through calling customer service. In some cases, you can do it online. We have some sample texts that you could use if you're going to send an email or a letter. And then just make sure to think through, will changing the due date change the next bill? Will it make it higher if you're asking for for the due date to be later, your first bill is going to be a little higher because it's covering a little more time. So making sure you think about all that. And then the last thing we say is that if you can't change the bill due date, you can still potentially use these resources to better organize, right? So maybe if you know that you're going to have a gap, is there a time when you get a little extra income, can you set it aside to cover the time when the bills are going to not line up so well? So even if you can't request that bill due date change, by just organizing your bills better, you can maybe capture a windfall when you get a little extra overtime, or you, your client, of course, in this case, your people you're working with, and be better organized, prepared, and know when everything is due. And just having that due date calendar when you know when each bill is coming due alone, putting it up on your refrigerator, although a lot of fridges these days the magnets don't stick to anymore because they're not the old kind of metal. So, however, maybe tape, but may be helpful. So that is the bills due date worksheet. Again, it's a 6-page, 3-page, 2-sided worksheet that you can access on our website. We would love to hear how if people find that useful in working with the people that you serve. And then I'm just going to mention a few other resources we have, and then we'll open up for questions. This it's hard to tell the format, the Behind on Bills booklet. It's actually a little booklet, sort of half of an 8x11 kind of sheet, spiral bound, Behind on Bills. It's colorful, engaging. It's kind of more fun than the worksheet I just showed you because it's got animals and colors, but it's got multiple tools to help people manage their bills, and it's got little fold-out pages with specific tools. In fact, if you could go to the next page, it lists out. Thank you. These are the tools. This is the table of contents. There are tools that can help you build a clearer picture of your income and spending, so where you can write down your income sources, similar to our worksheet, but different kind of format. You can track where your money goes. You can track where my bills are and when they're due. So again, similar to our worksheet, just in a very different format and a little different type of detail. The yellow tools can help people think about what they want to change around either increasing income or cutting cutting expenses. Please don't cut resources. And then the red tools are things to meet immediate challenges like responding to debt collectors or how you can get additional help. So these are very popular. They come out of your Money, Your Goals toolkit, and I think there have been assorted webinars. We've done a webinar on Your Money, Your Goals. If you look back at the archives of FinEx webinars, the Your Money, Your Goals folks who are our colleagues here at the Bureau have done webinars as well. So there's ways to learn more about these, but you can order these. They don't print so well because of their format. I think someone has asked if this is available in Spanish. I think this one is.
I thought it was too.
Yeah, most of our resources are available in Spanish. I believe the Behind on Bills is. So this is, again, a tool, a set of tools you can use to help people with bill issues. And then I'll just go through a couple of other things, and then we'll open for questions. We have another sort of 3-page worksheet that we put out many years ago. It's been very popular. So it's one of our top downloads called My New Money Goal Worksheet. And this is really a place where you can say, what is my money goal? I want to save, for an emergency fund, or I want to save to buy a new refrigerator. And again, it allows you to kind of track your, to put down your monthly expenses and think about how you could save for that goal. So it's a very simple 3-pager. You can only see the front page here. And you can order that in bulk from our website as well. It's a nice kind of budgeting. It's basically a budgeting tool, but it ties into, of course, this kind of managing bills and paying bills theme. And then a couple other things. We have a worksheet on helping people setting goals on managing spending. In particular, this was based on another research study. In fact, the same series here of Consumer Insights on Managing Spending, the same type of research that this study did, where we worked with a private sector company that tested out some of innovative ways to give people real-time feedback on their spending. So if they went into a store and were going to buy something, how do you know how much is in your left to spend for the week or the month or however you want to set it? So trying to get people to kind of really keep track of their budget in real time through some innovative tools. So this worksheet just gives people some ideas and helps people create a small, just a short plan on how they want to keep track of their spending and manage their spending. Again, this is a worksheet available on our website, and there's a whole study behind it. And a webinar. If you go back, you can listen to the webinar on this one if you're interested, from I think a year or two ago. And then I think we just have one more. Another thing that's in our webinar archive are rules to live by worksheets. And I'll just note that the theme here was that a lot of people have heard about rules of thumb for financial decisions, things like save 10% of your income or only spend so much. And that what we found in some focus groups was a lot of people said, that makes great sense, but I know that rule, but I can't follow it because, at my stage in life, I have too many other obligations, or that's too much based on my income, and then people wouldn't do anything. And so the insight was, how about letting people know what the common rule is, but then say, why don't you set your own that works for you, and then write a plan on how you're going to do it. Again, a plan being just a couple lines. And then what these worksheets did was to have you sign them. Let's see the signature line on this one, but so that you kind of make a commitment to yourself that you're going to follow through on that. And apparently the simple act of signing causes people to be more likely to do something, which is so fascinating. So there's one on spending, of setting like how much you're going to spend. That's the one you see on the screen. And then I'm going to ask, poor Heather's trying to answer WebEx questions, ask her to also advance the slide. There was also one on credit spending. So if you say, I don't want to spend too much on my credit card, so I will not, for example, use my credit card for purchases of more than a certain amount. There's also a webinar on this one, another research study that we did. But this worksheet also, and then there's a couple others on savings and checking a credit report, but these worksheets are all also available and maybe something that you want to use with your clients and the people you work with. So I'm going to stop there. There's a lot of information, but again, the insight here is that something as simple as changing a bill due date may help the people you work with better manage their bills, and we hope that some of these tools can help you work with people to do that.
Wonderful. That was excellent, Irene. Thank you for sharing that. It's a very interesting study. I love that they asked people, but they also tracked what some people actually did. So that's a great research method. Okay, so you see our resource pages that we have up there. We have our financial educators webpage. We also have our mailbox where you can write. If somebody looks like they were having difficulty with the slides, so feel free to just email the FinEx box and I'll send some slides out to you. And we also have our LinkedIn page, and we're trying to encourage people to post information about financial education there and ask questions, and we're generating more activity, which draws more people. So we encourage you to visit that as well. Let's see. We're going to get ready to take some calls. Operator, are you there?
I know she's there.
While we're waiting for the operator, let me just look and see if I missed any questions that we have here.
Are you able to hear me?
I am now.
Now we are.
Thank you. Yep. Operator, we're ready. I'm going to read a couple questions from here, and then we'll be ready to take calls.
But why don't we let her?
Would you like me to tell people how to queue up first?
Sure.
Yeah, so they have time.
If you would like to queue up to ask a question at this time, you may press star and then 1. You will be prompted to record your name, which is used to introduce your question. Again, that is star and then 1 if you would like to ask a question. One moment while we see if there are any questions by phone.
Thank you. So the easier way would be to mark the due date on the bill and place them in a box such that the date is visible for the upcoming bill and pay them as they become due. Well, that's an interesting method too. If you're organized enough to do that every single time, I think the benefit of that is that, it's kind of looking at you and facing you, and you have a system that's not too complicated. I think the nice thing about the worksheet is that you can capture some of the recurring stuff and kind of get accustomed to seeing it and have it all in one place. But that's an interesting method, and it really depends on what's best for you. Don't you think, Irene?
Yeah, and this worksheet, of course, is one tool you can use. So that what Heather just read is a suggestion somebody sent in through the WebEx Q&A function. And it is interesting, I think, that a lot of the things that we've learned as we've moved to such an electronic world is that there is still a place for the physical, that it like I said, signing a form actually seems to change the way people think subconsciously. They actually are more committed than if they don't sign. You would think it wouldn't matter.
Right.
And things like having your bills visible in a box with different, I guess, sections or envelopes in it or things like that, people who use different envelope methods to save or set money aside, that those actually, that we're still physical beings that, need a connection to that. So that's an intriguing idea, and I think, we would love to hear ideas like that and have all of you share them with each other as well, either through our LinkedIn site or other ways, because there are certainly a number of ways to do that, and I personally would love to hear more.
Operator, I think we're ready for some calls on the line. Thank you.
Do we have any questions, operator?
Thank you. Once again, if you would like to ask a question by phone, please press star and then one. One moment for our first question. The first question is from Ann Long. Your line is open.
Hi. This isn't a question. I'm sharing an experience I've had that has tripped me up several times. And it usually has to do with credit card bills. On some of them, now, instead of just a due date, you can't assume that that bill is due at 11:59 on the due date. A lot of them now, they're past due. If they don't receive payment in their time zone within, say, by 5 o'clock that day, 5 p.m., when that has happened, I get to customer service. It's usually a separate call, and I tell them what happened, and I didn't realize that that time difference made a difference, and usually they will waive the late charge, and I believe they'll waive the interest that they would have charged for the late payment.
Interesting.
Yeah, that has tripped me up. But if you go and ask them to, they have always been willing to waive the late charge. And if they've charged you any interest, it might take a couple statements for that to show up, but it will show up.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. That's a great strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I wonder too if you are using the worksheet. We hadn't thought about that nuance of it's not just the day it's due. There may be issues with time, or maybe you write down that it's due the day before so that you know that it'll get there on time. But thank you for sharing that. That's useful.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Potentially for others of you who are working with consumers. Are there any other voice questions, operator?
There are no other questions on the phone line at this time.
This is a very calm and placid group.
Pre-holiday
There's
group.
quite a few of you.
There is no charge for publications that you order. You can go to basically, if you go to our website, you'll see with our Publishers Pueblo, and you can order bulk amounts of things for your students or your clients that you coach, which makes it easier. So the booklet that Irene gave you is one that's popular to be ordered because it kind of be something difficult to download. But a lot of things also, if you need something quick or you run out of material, you can also download things from our website. And you can also repurpose those items. When you download them, if it's not, a couple of you had suggestions or things that you thought would be helpful, you can change them and make them work for you. And you can also put them up on your website for your clients to use. It's, public information, so you're welcome to do that. In fact, that's what we want, is to kind of spread the word and spread the use of them by using you all who work with the client base that we're trying to reach. So.
Yep, these are federal government resources. They are free. You can order them in bulk, although just so you know, right now the worksheet that I've been talking about is not yet up on our bulk ordering site. It takes a little time for us to actually get it up there. Right now you can access it on our website and download it, not order it yet, though hopefully that will be the case soon. But again, everything is available, as Heather said, for you to use, repurpose, and we very much welcome that. Do we have any other voice questions, or feel free to shoot anything else through the Q&A?
Well, we're waiting to see if there are any last questions. I just wanted to let you all know about upcoming webinars. We have one more webinar in December. We figured, well, sometimes it's a little bit of downtime for people when it gets closer to the holidays, and maybe you can squeeze in another one. And that one's actually going to be this coming Monday, the 17th, same time, 2 to 3. This one is going to be on using credit scores and reports as a financial coaching tool. We have a guest presenter, and it's going to be a two-part series, and the second part is going to be January 10th. So the first part, we're actually going to go through credit report, reading it and how to go about using it to integrate things. And then the second session is going to be specifics and going in deep to the actual sample credit report that will be provided and discussing it and having questions asked. So if you think those sessions will be useful for you, we'd love for you to join us. And you can check back on our website to find out about other upcoming webinars as well. So hopefully we'll see many of you, or at least virtually, see your names at the webinar on Monday. Operator, are there any last questions?
There are no questions on the phone line.
Well, Irene, thank you so much for coming and sharing this information with us, and we really appreciate it. And for those that asked for slides, I tried to capture it. If you don't get them, be sure to just email the FinEx box. I think I got the two people that said they wanted them in the chat. Okay, well, that's it for today. Thank you for joining us. I hope you all have a good evening and look forward to having you at our next webinar. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
This concludes today's conference. Thank you for your attendance. You may disconnect at this time.